Welcome back. It is another edition of the On the Mic podcast. I am Mike Pendleton, and super lucky today because not only is boxing back, we had a huge UFC 250 weekend, I should say. This week, look out for another episode featuring some names from that card. But today is about boxing, but today is also about a bigger message. And my guest, who I'm very lucky to welcome, is the one and only Barak Bess from the Ak and Barak show on Sirius XM. Sir, how are you?
I'm great, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's truly, I feel like I'm like brown nosing here, but it's definitely an honor to have you on the show. You're someone who almost every show I do with you, I'm like, damn, he really said that, or he had this.
Yeah, that's brown nosing because I don't say much. I don't say much.
But I want to just kind of get into it because I was kind of just thrown in and still trying to work into getting to know all the hosts at Sirius. And then the pandemic hit. I was picking up a little bit momentum of working with every show. So about you and your background, how did you come into boxing, and what led into the media side of you covering the sport?
Well, the very, very origin of it probably stems back to my son when he was 6 years old, and I brought him to Gleason. See, fighting is real big in my family. I grew up in martial arts, been fighting since I was 3 years old. And I brought him to Gleason's gym because he wasn't really excelling in karate. And it's like in my family, if you don't fight and you're not good, then you don't need to be a part of the family. So I brought him to Gleason's. And I realized that was where his gift was. And coming from karate is like, there's so much love and respect in that world, in the world of MMA, in the world of karate. I don't want to say MMA, So to go into boxing, it was like, damn, it looked like it's just a bunch of dudes that just want to learn how to fight, and have a lot of egos. So it made me feel like I need to be a part of the boxing world so I can help change it. And I need to be there to protect my son from this kind of mentality, because I wasn't raising my son to be some kind of brute just because you know how to fight, and so that's the origin of it. And I guess the media side, by the time I wanted to really get involved, it's not like I'm fighting. I stopped fighting, I think, I don't remember what year, but I was 33 years old, my last fight that I had at Columbia University. It was a big karate event. And I realized that my life is centered around fighting. I love boxing ever since a kid, and I really wanted to get involved in it. And with me, everything starts with prayer. And I said a prayer to God that I just wanted to be in the boxing world, didn't know what I was going to do. In actuality, that same week that I prayed, I was ringside at Zab Judah's fight against Danny Garcia back in 2013 with a camera. So I enlisted in the boxing world as a cameraman. Was I a real cameraman? No. I bought a camera that same week. So that on a Thursday, I bought a camera, and Saturday, I had credentials and I was ringside, looking like a photographer.
That is amazing. Now, a couple of things I want to hit on what you just said. With someone who has a karate background as strong and deep as yourself and your family does, when did you and how did you decide to separate MMA, karate, and boxing? Because some people nowadays, when they hear karate, they just, that's a martial art. We're gonna lump it in with mixed martial arts. It could have been very easy for you to take your extensive background in karate and cover MMA, but you've kind of focused on boxing. And I'm just curious, does that go back to everything you just talked about with how you raised your son and what you wanted to change about the culture and the scene of boxing?
Yeah, it definitely goes back to that. But also, I found out later in life that my grandfather used to spar with Jersey Joe Walcott and Pretty Boy Floyd Patterson. And my grandfather was a champion boxer in the Marines and the amateurs. And when he lived in Brooklyn, and so did Floyd Patterson, and they used to spar together. And I didn't realize that it was in my blood. I thought I was kind of like disrespecting karate a little bit by being so engaged in boxing, but I couldn't help it that I loved boxing so much. You know, I just couldn't help it. I was drawn to it, you know, from an early age, you know, so, but then, and as far as MMA, when I grew up, I'm old school, man. Like MMA, when it first came out, was a disrespectful term, first of all, because it means you didn't master anything. Mixed martial art, what the hell is that? You know what I'm saying? So it means, okay, you got a little piece of this, you got a little piece of that, a little piece of that. And you know, when the UFC came out in '95, I'm looking at these guys, I'm like, a lot of these guys can't fight. You know, you see them doing they're training their techniques, and then when they get in the octagon, it's like it was sloppy as hell. You know, so it had to grow on me. It had to grow on a lot of old school martial artists. You know, hearing this term MMA, now I respect it fully. You know, but at that time when it first came out, we were like, you know, if you're not mastering one style, what the hell are you doing? You know, so but as far as boxing, man, it was something that was in me, and I feel like it was passed down through blood, you know.
Absolutely. One of the things I really like about you, and you've never been shy from every show I've heard you on or worked on with you, is you always bring up that you're a man of faith, and you always bring up, you know, your spiritual and faith background. For you, how does that transition into what you do on a day-to-day basis? Because, I mean, let's be honest, it's 2020. We're in the fight game. Not a lot of people reflect on it. There are some. I'm not saying there's none. But nowadays with social media, trash talk, hype, this and that, I feel like people are afraid to be them true selves, no matter if they're in front of a TV camera, a radio microphone, or fighting themselves. You don't shy away from it.
Well, I tell you like this, my relationship with God is part of my character. It's the reason why I have this character I have today. If it wasn't for that, then me and you wouldn't be friends. You know what I'm saying? I was a very angry guy. I was a very violent guy. And so I feel like talent is wonderful, but character sustains you wherever your talent can bring you. And my relationship with God is part of my character. So it's not something fake that I'm trying to teach the whole world about Jesus Christ. It's just something that's really in me, and it's real. So when it comes out, it comes out.
Was that something that, like, so when you said, you know, I was angry as a violent person, when did that change come from you, when you really accepted the faith and how you were going to move forward in your life?
I guess there was a time period where I seen that the street rules that we live by, you know, that street code, is fake. You know, I seen guys that there's times when, you know, if I really want to get candid, on the street, sometimes you go to war and you're looking for people, and you might be looking to end their life. And that was a scenario where we had beef. My crew had beef with some other guys, and we were looking for them. And we'd be in cars with 10 guns in that car and 10 men in a van, and we looking for them, and they probably looking for us too. And if we would have seen each other, somebody might have died. And then one day I was walking down the block, and I seen meeting up with my friends, and I seen one of the guys from the other crew rolling dice with my guys. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, we go out looking for these dudes. Like, what happened to the beef that we had with them? Like, I'm sure if they caught me slipping, I'd be dead, you know, or hurt. And I realized that money, women, so many things can break that so-called street code. And that's when I realized it wasn't real, and it wasn't for me, because I'm an all-in type of dude. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to go all in, whatever it is, and I'm not going to half step at all. So once I realized that, I was like, I don't want to be a part of this game because it's fake, you know? And that's when I started seeking God, actually. I was in my early 20s, and reading the Bible just changed my life, and I didn't want to be that man anymore. And it was a process. It was a slow process, but and it's a forever journey in actuality, you know. But from that particular street mentality, yeah, that was easy to break, man. I realized that I had an addiction. I had an addiction to violence, and I just had to separate myself from that world.
I'm going to be honest, a bit taken back by how candid you're being, and I really appreciate it. And I'm going to try and connect both of our backgrounds here a little bit. You know, I'm from Chicago, where Walter Payton and Michael Jordan ruled the world. And there was no boxing, there was no MMA, none of that mattered in Chicago. What did matter was, as you see all over the news, almost on a day-to-day basis, is Chicago's South Side culture, how people are killing each other left and right. I know when I would travel to the East Coast, people are like, where are you from? I'm like, Chicago. They're like, Chicago? I'm like, it's a major city. One part of that city is what you see in the spotlight of the news, and I hate it. I can fully admit that I've never walked any streets from the north side to the south side in fear of my life, because I do have faith, and I also have confidence in who I am as a person. But as I found MMA, because I was covering football, basketball, baseball when I got into sports media, when I found fighting, I found my passion. I found what I feel is my calling, because it's one person. You can't blame anyone else but yourself. So I'm curious, from your end, growing up in New York, in Brooklyn, where that same stigma could be said about violence rules all, how you were able to bring both fighting as a sport, a combat sport, boxing, karate, and your background all together to become who you are today.
Oh man, well, me, I'm about purpose. You know, bigger than wanting a paycheck, bigger than wanting to be famous. Those were never my drives. My drive was about purpose. I prayed. I had a desire to be around boxing, yes, but within a blessing that God gives is service, and there's purpose. So I'm the kind of person that is about I deal with real relationships. You know, when I met you, you're somebody that, you know, you associate producer on Sirius XM. I'm not just gonna, you know, and I developed a real relationship with you, you know, and people around me, I like to develop real relationships if there's somebody who, you know, I can relate to, you know. So I'm moved by purpose, man. And my prayer is to be used by God in my environment, you know. So I feel like God allows everything that you've gone through, whether he wanted it to happen or not. He's so perfect and so sovereign that it can be a blessing in the genre that you're in. So the reason why I'm able to speak to these fighters is because they respect me, because of my background, or because of my character now, you know. So there are fighters and people involved in this boxing world that I actually help, and that's part of my service. You know, for me to be here, I feel like I have to give back. And the reason why I'm even here in reality, the reason why I'm in this media side, is because I feel like if you look at the participants, the players in the game, if you will, they're part of a certain culture. I'm part of that culture, but boxing was not. You know what I'm saying? So the whole culture of the participants changed, but the people who covered it were not from that culture, so it didn't match per se. And I'm not knocking anybody else. I'm just saying that the reason why I have these relationships with these fighters is because I'm part of that culture. You know, they look at me different. I stand out in the media room, you know, so therefore in our interviews, we get a different reaction from them, you know, and that's really why I'm here, man. I really wanted to give fighters a platform to be them. I wanted to introduce people to these fighters. I feel like boxing is an acquired taste. You got a lot of people who they don't want to see people fighting. But because Mayweather showed his personality on 24/7 on HBO years ago, he became a star. And people just want to tune in just because they liked him. They liked the kind of personality he portrayed, or they disliked the personality and they wanted to see him lose. Either way, people are attracted to people. And if you never get to know the person, then you don't want to watch them. Think about it. People like the sport of basketball, but you know, the people who are idolized are the ones who show personality the most. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I'm here for. I want to show the world. I want to introduce these boxers to the world. You know, there's more to them than just fighting. You know, there's stories involved. There's personalities involved. Kid Chocolate was homeless. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of adversity that these guys have gone to just to get where they're at. And if you tell that story, people are like them, and in turn, that makes the sport bigger.
I mean, we're somewhat just getting started, and you just nailed every reason why I wanted to have you on. Now, I'm going to give you a lot of ammunition to make jokes about me in the future, but everyone knows I got into this MMA game because of Conor McGregor. And people are like, oh, he just talks trash. No, go back and read the books, read his story, listen to him, and watch his documentary. This dude was getting welfare checks and was a plumber and just decided he didn't want to do it anymore. And he went against the grain, and he found fighting. He found his calling. But everyone wants to talk about the crossover fight with Floyd Mayweather, attacking the bus, the rivalry with Khabib and the Nate Diaz. I'm like, you guys are just focusing on what he has done to grow his brand as a fighter. But there's a whole different person of Conor. I mean, I'll be frank, he didn't get enough attention, in my opinion, in the national media for what he did in Ireland with COVID-19, all the donations he made to the hospital. Sure, it was written about, but it wasn't covered the way a Mayweather-McGregor press conference was. But that's neither here or there. But exactly what you're saying is what I've looked to do with you, any fighter, anyone that comes on my show, is to tell their story, because I feel people always have stories to tell. It's up to me to give them that platform to tell it. And when I was in covering the NFL and, following my favorite players, I like the Chad Ochocinco's, the Terrell Owens. People are like, you just like the loudmouth guys. Yeah, but there's a bigger story to that. You talk about all the stuff that you do, and obviously you have the Barak show on Sirius XM and DAZN. But another thing you guys have, you and Ak have on DAZN, is the pull-up. Now, that's something that I love because it fits our time. And, how did that come to fruition? Was that something you and Ak always discussed? I know you guys are big on social media, big on Instagram. Did you guys just go through and look for these people who are just trolls? How did that come about?
It came about from, having a platform on Instagram, having a social media presence, and just looking at, the comments from the fans. And we used to talk like, yo, I would beat this dude up. Like, what is wrong? And then sometimes I would respond. Ak has a problem with responding to everybody. And sometimes I would respond and say, first of all, I know in person you wouldn't talk like that. And not because I feel like I'm tougher than you, not because I feel like I'm gonna hurt you. It's because most human beings don't disrespect somebody they don't know. And that's just, no matter how tough you are. Normally, you don't disrespect somebody you don't know for no reason. If you hear them talking on the street, you're passing by, and you hear their opinion on something, you don't interrupt and say, man, shut the F up. You don't know what you're talking about. But online, on the comfort of your own home, that's what you do. And we was like, yo, you know what? This has to be stopped. I wish there was a way like we could just pop up on these guys, and that's basically how it happened. It just came from like frustration of seeing these fans bad mouths these fighters, and we realized that because it started with us just popping up on trolls by ourselves, you know what I'm saying? And then I don't know if it was, just having a team. Brainstorming is amazing, and we was like, what if we bring a fighter up? What if we bring that fighter that they're disrespecting? And I had a friend of mine contact me. He was like, yo, Zab Judah's about to have a fight in June. Can you do an interview with him on your show? And I was like, you know what? We got this concept called a pull-up. Why don't we do that with Zab? Because I know he's from Brooklyn. I know he'll go hard, and it'll be like a troll prevention. We'll really scare this guy, you know what I mean? Into realizing that, you got to have respect for people because you never know what can happen. And Zab did such a good job that video went viral. Like everybody was, 50,000 reposts on Twitter. I don't know, 5 million views, and everybody really took to it because everybody can relate. People see that they are keyboard warriors every day.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. How have the fighters taken to this? Because I can imagine if you're a fighter, and the best advice I've ever heard is from a guy, and I'm definitely showing my bias here, is Joe Rogan, where he just says, don't read that shit. He goes, don't read the comments, don't look at it, because you're gonna take up your own bandwidth inside your head if you start reading comments. But I can only imagine fighters, it's hard to ignore the critics and the fans. on social media. So when you approach fighters with this concept, are they like, I'm all in, I can't wait, like, let's go right now, I'm driving? Like, how is it?
They love us so much that we don't necessarily have to approach them anymore. They hit us up. Sometimes I might be texting somebody about something else, and they be like, yo, Jared Hurd or Danny Garcia, like, yo, when am I going to pull up on somebody? You know what I'm saying? Errol Spence the other day, he was like, yo, I want to pull up on somebody. You know, Devin Haney, like a lot of these guys, you know, took to it because, like I said, everybody can relate to that, you know. But do I recommend people reading posts and comments? No, not at all. Not at all. But do I think that we're teaching a lesson and making fun of this and highlighting foolishness to help them? Absolutely, man. I think it's a brilliant concept if you do it with taste. You know, so how we've constructed it now is that we have someone who knows that particular troll call in. You know, so it's not like we're searching for trolls and we want to go out there and scare them. Nah, it's like a prank almost. You know what I mean? Like if you have a friend or family member and you know that they hate Danny Garcia, like our last pull-up we did, then you call us up, you DM us, and you tell us the information, and we go there and then we surprise them with the fighter. And at the end of the whole thing, we like, look, this is the guy that set you up. You know what I mean? So it's really like an intervention, man. I think that we don't care when when fans disrespect us online, but when fans disrespect guys who put their lives on the line, that hurts us. And that's why we do this for these fighters.
I couldn't agree more. It's something where, you know, I am a person, and everybody who knows me knows this. I'm someone who likes to watch all UFC pay-per-views at a local establishment, give back to the community. I don't mind having a few adult drinks, you know, watching fights, but I also kind of get defensive while I'm out because you might think that fighter is done, but you may be sitting down for your first ever fight. So just appreciate what you're watching, but that's a whole nother story. Now, we are here to talk also about boxing. Boxing is back. For you, what was it like going through this layoff period? And I want to kind of make a note because I know you talked about it publicly. You know, you had COVID-19 yourself. I'm very happy you were able to push through it.
I actually didn't want to mention that, though. I actually didn't want to mention that, to tell you the truth.
That's fine. We cut that whole part out.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
But it halted everybody's world, personally, professionally, sports-wise, entertainment-wise, and boxing took this long layoff. Have you ever had a time or ever thought that there would be a time where you would have to go so long without this sport?
Of course not. Of course not. This was halting. You know, this was halting. It was definitely a time of reflection. I'm sure it was tough for a whole lot of people. People lost their paychecks, and not only in boxing, you know, just the whole country, you know, and around the world actually. But if I had to be totally honest, it's been nothing but a blessing for me personally. Even getting the virus was a blessing for me, you know, because it helped me put things in perspective, you know, and I think it helped me prioritize a little bit better, you know, and it also increased my prayer life, and that was important to me as well, you know. But what it's done for me is just increase my work. Actually, I'm working more now because of this pandemic, you know. But yeah, I've seen the negative effects on some people. I think overall this disease created a lot of fear. It created a lot of fear in society. I think anxiety is on a rise because of it. It forced people to deal with themselves. And this is the thing. In this world where most people spend more time on their phone, there's a part of Instagram where you can go into settings, and I'm sure just about any app, you can go into settings and see how long you spend on this app. And I was looking at mine today because my fiance asked me a question. Did I see something on Instagram? And in my mind, I'm like, I was barely on it. So I went on it today, and it says yesterday I was on it for 10 minutes, you know. And I'm sure if most people go on it, it would probably say they average hours, you know. So I've probably been my biggest average is probably an hour a day, my average, so I think that that's been taking up so much of our time, that most people spend so much time looking at other people's lives, reading other people's opinions, and concentrating on other people's thoughts, that they never spend time with themselves. They don't have much time spending alone time, quiet time, no radio, no Instagram, no Twitter, no social media, no phone, no TV, nobody talking. That now you get all this time to yourself, and it's like you don't really know what to do. And you're losing your mind, when in reality, that should be your sanctuary. That should be your safe haven when you're dealing only with yourself, when you're alone. That should be ultimate tranquility, but it's not. So we're learning how to love ourselves again. We're learning to about ourselves. I think about this. If you're spending most of your time on social media or anything else other than thinking about yourself, then how can you say you really even know yourself? What are your own thoughts? Most of our thoughts are probably influenced by something we've seen or something we read or somebody else's idea. I think this has given us time to focus on our own ideas. And that's probably scary to some people. And it's caused a lot of anxiety, and I think that's the stronghold that this disease had on society.
That's beautifully said. What are you expecting? Top Rank Boxing, we're talking Tuesday morning. Top Rank comes back Tuesday night. There's 2 cards this week on ESPN, Tuesday and Thursday. What are you expecting in the return of boxing?
Well, I think what they're going to try and show, and it's going to be very evident, is that they want to do things with a high level of safety. I think they want to make that presence clear first, that we want to do this safely, so that there's no negative news surrounding their event, first of all. And then I think it's just going to go back to normal, just back to business, man. I expect that fighters are going to realize that there might be more eyes on them than normal. So everybody is going to try and give their best effort, and if they're smart, the fighters who are on deck, they're going to be getting in shape. If they're smart, they're going to get in shape, because this is going to be the point where you're going to have more eyes on you than normal. And I think this is your time to succeed. So I think we're going to see Bob Arum trying to spearhead boxing back again, and to put on an incredible show. I seen the venue. It looks beautiful, and I think we're going to have a good show tonight.
Shakur Stevenson will be in the main event. He's not the biggest name, but there is a lot of hype, hope, optimism for his future and his career. And it's a two-parter here. I'll start with this. What does having a guy like Shakur on the main event, or in the main event, in boxing's return for Top Rank on ESPN, what does that mean for him, and what does it mean for Top Rank?
Well, first of all, it's a big plus for Top Rank, because forever in the history books, you brought boxing back first. You understand? And I believe that's one of the reasons why Dana was in such a rush, so he can be the first sport back. But also, when you think about it, it takes 2 things for someone to come back in boxing this early. And I'm talking about the fighters. Either you need it financially, or you have a high level of humility. And who has more humility than a fighter who, in his heart, still has something to prove? An up-and-coming fighter like Shakur Stevenson. So this is the reason why you don't see the Canelos, you don't see the Anthony Joshuas, because they require something a little bit more. They require a little bit more, and there's a lot more humility in the younger fighters, in the guys who still proving something today.
With that being said, eventually people are going to have to return. We're seeing it on the MMA side, and I know your co-host Ak hates Dana White, and right now there's conversation about that. Jorge Masvidal wants to be released. John Jones wants to be released. Henry Cejudo retired because he has nothing more to accomplish. Conor McGregor said he retired again because there's no opponents out there for him that make the most sense. I think at the end of the day, not having that live gate, not having a crowd full of people means something more to these fighters. You know, I always look back at my first UFC event I watched live was UFC 189 when Sinead O'Connor, the Irish singer, introduced Conor McGregor. And you couldn't even hear yourself think if you were in the building that night. It was an incredible atmosphere. Now you take that all away from one of the most polarizing figures. It's a little understandable why you wouldn't want to fight in an empty crowd, but you're going to have to get back. So I'll look at some of these bigger names, the Canelos, the Tyson Furies, Anthony Joshua's, Deontay Wilder's. We have fights that need to be made. Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford, Lomachenko. All these fights need to get – there's plenty of fights out there. They all need to get made. Do you think that boxing will press forward and get their bigger names without fans?
Yeah, I think eventually everybody's going to get the picture. And also, you know what this does? Adversity really highlights your real character. It really brings out what's really inside of you. And think about it. A lot of these fighters, if you really research a million videos of every single fighter, at one point they're going to tell you why they're in the sport. And it's never because of the fans. Not in the beginning. It's because they love the sport. They're not out there trying to, because think about it, the origin of their career had nothing to do with fans. Yes, maybe that's a dream coming out before, 20,000 fans or whatever, but that wasn't what got you there. And I think sometimes people need to be reminded, and that's what adversity does. It strips you of what you probably took for granted, and it starts you all over again. And that's what we're starting from the beginning again. And some fighters need to be reminded that they had a love of the sport. They had a love of fighting. They had the love of competing. And when they realize that and get back to that, then the sport is going to be a better sport in reality, and they'll be able to fight without a crowd because they should be used to that from the amateur days.
I'm going to ask you to make a prediction here. Of the bigger names in boxing, who do you think will be the first bigger names back to compete with or without a crowd?
I think it'll be probably Canelo or Wilder and Fury, because I think in Wilder and Fury's case, it's bigger than the fans, especially in Wilder's case. He has a wrong that he wants to make right, whether he can win or not. I think that's so important for him. So I think having the fans there is not his concern as far as that. As far as Canelo, he get guaranteed money. Most people's argument here is they're missing out on the gate money. Canelo gets guaranteed money. Why would he care who's in the crowd?
It makes a lot of sense. And it's like you're a pro in media, because I was going to transition to something more serious away from boxing, but in a way I think boxing can kind of help. And it's the social injustice taking place all throughout the country, all throughout the world. Someone you just mentioned, and I didn't say it when we played it, when you guys discussed it. It was the first time I heard the speech that Deontay Wilder put together on racial injustice in this country. And I know that's someone you have a close relationship with. I'm almost trying to ask this cautiously. Wouldn't this be, you can't forget COVID-19. I'm not trying to be ignorant to that. But look at a bigger pressing issue over something that has not gone away and something he's been open about, which is racial injustice. Isn't this the perfect time, if healthy, for him to capitalize on getting back in the ring and continuing to further his message? Because he's been public about this, and with everything, you kind of want to strike right now to have yourself heard loud and clear.
100%. When does a message get best received? When everybody's listening, and people have no choice but to listen now. I think there's been plenty George Floyds. There's been plenty, seen and unseen. But because the world is in this particular state that it is now, we're more apt to see and we're more apt to listen because of the current state of the world. Most of us are home. Most of us are paying attention to media now. So yes, this is an opportune time for him if there's any message that's inside of him, for it to come out now would be probably the most opportunity for it to be received by millions of people. So I definitely agree with you.
I know you and I spoke about this, when we were, setting up this interview. And there's one thing I wanted to make clear before I give you the floor is, people have said, hey, you haven't really said too much or, about what's going on. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a person of color. I can't speak. I know what I see. I know what I've seen my entire life growing up in Chicago. And I know that there's plenty of injustice. But I think my platform is to give people who have seen it, who have been through it, who have experienced it, people of color who know truly day in and day out what it's like to feel injustice, to feel racism. I'm not afraid to say it still exists to this day. And I'm not afraid to say it's not going away. Unfortunately, it's not. But if I allow people who know this better than me, like yourself, to come on and have this platform to speak on it, well, then maybe I'm doing my part, because I can't sit here and say everything that needs to change. So giving you this platform, and I'm very, very grateful that you were willing to speak about this. You just said George Floyd's unseen, unheard, plenty seen, plenty heard. Barak, I just ask you, how do we get through this?
Man, I mean, it's kind of like what I said earlier, man, about listening. I think listening is underrated. I think it's an art. And I think this is the reason why a lot of white people are enraged now, even though this is not a new thing. This has been happening. I remember when Rodney King happened back in '91, I said, this is normal. It's just people, they just got caught on videotape. You know what I'm saying? Though I was a young kid, I had already experienced it. I had already experienced police brutality. And it's funny because in reality, it should just be a police brutality case, George Floyd. But people are not stupid. We realize that it also has something to do with race. Why we are confronted by police a different way, and it's because of race. It's racial profiling. And I feel like the first step is listening. And I feel like when I've gone to these rallies recently in Brooklyn, especially in my neighborhood, I've seen more white people than I've seen black or brown people, because people are listening. So that's the first step. And now that people are listening, I seen a white lady, she had a sign and she said, "Dear fellow white people, we can no longer be silent." And that's the second step. The second step is people like yourself. First you had to listen, and now you got to speak up. And the more people that speak up, the more changes that we'll see.
I think that was going to be my next question there is, as everyone listens more, how or what can we all do? Because I know we can call upon our governments and our police departments, but if, like you said, it should be a police brutality case, unfortunately it's not, and it's something I said, racism will exist. And I really do believe, badge or no badge, I personally feel we can't ignore all forms of racism. I saw a picture on Twitter that said racism still exists, and it was a picture of a convenience store in a white neighborhood with no gates over shampoo and hair products. But then in an urban neighborhood, they were all locked up, saying, "Let us know if you need assistance." To me, that's also a form of racism. So I guess my question to you is, how and what can we all do, no matter what color, moving forward, outside of listening? What actions can we take? Because I think it's one of the simple things we can do is treat everyone better. But what can we do?
You kind of nailed it, man. It really just boils down on the way we treat people, and it's about bearing each other's burdens. When we become so desensitized by the media, you see somebody in the front page of a newspaper or online, you see people dead almost every day, or some scandal or something negative, and you become desensitized where it's nothing. You don't think about it. So now that we're listening and now that we're speaking up, it involves, now we have to actually treat people a certain way. We have to actually understand. There's a boxer who said the other day, he said that there's no systemic racism anymore. And he's a good friend of mine, and I believe it's only because of ignorance. He obviously he doesn't live a lifestyle of being a black man. He doesn't understand, the plight of being a black or brown person in America. He doesn't understand what we go through. And when I speak to people from other countries, they say the same thing. I remember I had a disagreement with somebody from the UK, and it was like, why do you mention race when you're talking about Floyd compared to Conor McGregor? And I'm like, I'm not saying, I wasn't promoting any negativity, but I'm just saying it's reality. Like, it's a double standard. Like, it's just reality. And I didn't realize that he grew up in a different country and racism isn't as prominent as it is here. So yeah, it really involves just us changing the way we treat each other, the way we look at each other and the way we treat each other, and then wanting to speak up. The more people, listen, when politicians run, they run on platforms. The biggest platforms are what? Taxes, stuff like that, and different kinds of reform. Until we speak up and make racism a reform that we need to be one of the biggest platforms, then probably, we're not going to get change. So it really involves us speaking up as a people, as a human race.
Giving credit to the show that you do on DAZN and Sirius XM, the Hawk and Barak show, I think one thing you guys do, you guys don't turn a blind eye to anything. You also talk to those in boxing, but also in entertainment and lifestyle and pop culture and everyone. At the end of the day, one thing I've personally taken away from your guys' show is that everyone is human. No matter their past, no matter their fights, no matter their music, we're all human. And you guys do an amazing job of pulling out that human element, which is why you were the one I wanted to talk to about this topic. Is this now a time for a guy like myself and your show and all other shows, and no matter what, anyone who has a platform to allow and push these celebrities or these athletes to speak up more? Because in the NFL and the NBA, you have been criticized for the last 4 years, Colin Kaepernick, LeBron James being, the poster athletes of feeling that criticism. But is this now a time where we have to push this upon our athletes and our entertainers to say, don't shy away from this question? I'm asking you this question because you're only going to speak up if there's another George Floyd. Let's not wait for the next George Floyd. Let's talk about it right now. Use your following, use this show as your platform to speak out.
Exactly. Actually, there was always time for that. That should have been, since the beginning, so it's just, this is a more critical time. But I'm not somebody who says everybody with a platform should speak. No, that's not what I'm saying. Everybody, there's many ways of speaking. There's many ways of helping. I think that everybody with a platform doesn't need to voice their opinion on every scenario, because that's not everybody's forte. That's not everybody's gift. I've said this on my show, when Gucci was going through their problem with the sweater that kind of mimicked blackface, people, TMZ went to Floyd, and they obviously knew they wasn't going to get anything profound from Floyd about this Gucci situation. So they asked him, and he gave something that, black people felt disrespected. He said, I'll wear whatever I want to wear and stuff like that. Everybody doesn't need a platform. Everybody doesn't have the talent of speaking out for injustice. I do feel like if you have a platform, then you have the opportunity to speak a bigger message. But no, I don't put the onus on everybody. I do feel like if you have that platform, that probably means you have more money. Then there's other ways you can help. Maybe you can donate your time at a homeless shelter. Maybe you can donate some money. There's so many ways that we can help as a society, and help our people, wherever the problems may lie. But do I feel like everybody should speak? No, because look what happened when Drew Brees speak. Look what happened when certain people speak. Look what happens when the president speaks. So not everybody that has that platform needs to speak about injustice.
That's a great point. I think we have, as a country and as a human society, need to change the narrative. And with that being said, kind of going back to boxing and someone you know very well, and again, I'll bring it up because one of the most powerful things I've ever heard is Deontay Wilder's speech. And I think in changing the narrative, someone you guys know very well, and I'm not just Deontay Wilder, but when I say change the narrative, that Radio Raheem Deontay Wilder clip went viral because they saw a big, loud black boxer screaming to this day. They totally missed everything else. And if we change that narrative, and now he comes out with this amazing speech, this amazing video, and now people are listening, which is exactly everything we've talked about throughout this whole time. Now people are listening. They weren't listening back then because it was a viral clip and it skyrocketed Radio Raheem. Great for him. He asked the question. Props to him on that, but we weren't listening back then.
Right.
When you have a guy in Deontay Wilder who has continued to preach this message and will never shy away from it, what does that do for boxing? Because I think it's great.
I think it definitely shines the light on boxing, and I think it's more so about where he wants to go after boxing. I think he's somebody who's seen injustice, who experienced injustice growing up in Alabama, and in the southern states, man, it's so different than out here on the East Coast or here in New York. It's like either people love you or they hate you, and they're not private with their hate, put it that way. Spending a lot of time in the South as a young kid, you see Ku Klux Klan members, you see their meetings, you see people who actually hate you, and they're not scared to be public with it, and it's not hidden, and so I feel like that's in him. He used to get shunned for it years ago, months ago, but because George Floyd, like I said, it's caused people to listen now. Look at the NFL. They're backtracking a little bit now. In 2016, Colin Kaepernick was a son of a bee or whatever, I think, or whatever the president called him or whoever. The NFL came down so hard on him, and now they're realizing what he did was from a greater purpose, and it made sense, and maybe they were wrong. Even though they didn't mention his name, Colin Kaepernick, because then they would have to restore him some kind of way. You know what I mean? So I think that it does a great thing for boxing, because, him being that strong voice, it's only going to bring more viewers, more listeners. But it's bigger than boxing. It's bigger than boxing, if you ask me. I think Deontay Wilder is another person who lives according to purpose. When we have our personal talks, he has things that are greater than boxing. He says, this is only the beginning of my journey. Boxing is actually a platform to help him do greater things in his life.
Yeah. One thing that I want to kind of echo to what you just said is that don't be afraid to say names, right? We're seeing that said on social media a lot. And we have no problem mentioning our favorite celebrities who are speaking out. But I urge everyone, just kind of what you said, say, if you're the NFL, say Colin Kaepernick's name. And I don't want to be ignorant to everyone who has become victim of police brutality. But the two biggest names we hear right now, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, say their names. Don't just categorize it as police brutality, racism. Say their names. You say their names, you're going to draw the attention. And it's something that, and say Colin Kaepernick's name. I want to get your thoughts real quick on this. Carlos Hyde, who has played all over the NFL, just signed with the Seattle Seahawks. There was a massive message sent by several superstars in the NFL last week. They put together a video saying these names, saying Black Lives Matter, calling upon the NFL to say that they were wrong. And Roger Goodell in the NFL, they admitted that. But they won't mention Colin Kaepernick's name And Carlos Hyde said, you want to show us that you're serious, that you mean business? A team needs to sign Colin Kaepernick. And I'm just curious, we could talk about the whole football side, but from what it would mean to this country, that we stop looking the other way and we say his name and we change the narrative and we accept everything that he had done 4 years ago. Do you believe that is the right step the NFL should take?
100%. I mean, think about it. Have you ever argued with your girlfriend, your partner, and you said sorry, and then she goes, "What are you sorry for?" Because we need details. True evidence of revelation is detail. So how can we sit there and say sorry and not saying, actually giving an example of what you're actually sorry for? And I think that's a total disrespect, not even mention his name. Like he didn't suffer for years, just because he stood on his principle, and I think that's just total disrespect. I think if they really want to show that they are apologetic, if they really want to show that they understand, then they would mention his name.
Yeah, I think, again, it's something that needs to be done, because I think one thing the NFL fails to realize, and maybe you see this, covering a professional sport, is, and I was someone, I believe I still have it, but if you stand for what's right and you won't back away from your favorite athlete or your favorite entertainer because they speak out on injustice, well, if you want to do it by wearing a 49ers hat when he was still on the team, or a Kaepernick jersey more significantly, which I did, people were, how dare you disrespect the national anthem? How dare you disrespect? Wait. I'm not disrespecting. I'm just wearing his jersey. So I think the NFL failed to realize that effective, you're not just hurting Colin Kaepernick, but everyone who stands with him and behind him and will push with him, you're hurting them as well. And again, it's so many cases unseen, unheard. I do believe it's time to start saying names. I do believe it's time to start changing narratives. And I want to say, because I want to end this on a lighter note, one, I'm incredibly thankful for all your time and really appreciate you being candid about this, because, again, it's not something where I felt like I could address correctly on my own. And working with you for the last few months as I have, I've really connected with your line of thinking, the way you speak about things. And like you said, not everyone should speak on certain topics, but I think you use your platform the right way. So I appreciate that. With that all said, man, what fights do we need to see in 2020?
Man, we need to see Canelo fight a real significant opponent. That's what we need to see, man, because he's somebody who's shown that he would really fight anybody moving up to 175 pounds, fighting Kovalev. People say, oh, they caught him on the downside of his career, but I don't think there's another 160-pounder that would go up to fight Kovalev right now, even after he's been knocked out by Canelo. So we need to see him fight a formidable opponent, maybe a Triple G for a trilogy. And obviously we need to see a unification of the heavyweight titles. We need to see an undisputed heavyweight champion. So if Wilder and Fury has to get it done, and then we need the winner of that to fight Joshua. And that is so important for boxing, because, from old, everybody knows if the heavyweight division is good, then boxing is good.
Why is there so much lust for this rematch? I will never buy the excuse of the suit. I'm sorry. I was looking for that suit online for a week after. I didn't care that he lost. I just wanted to walk around with it because I feel like I have Thor's hammer in my fist, but I've never actually been in a boxing match. So don't take me up on that. But why is there so much lust over this trilogy?
I think it's about because they're both, big figures in the sport. They both have, animated personalities. And at the end of the day, even though Deontay Wilder was dominated in that fight, he still packs an incredible punch, where people are saying he's the hardest hitting heavyweight of all times. So when you have power like that, you can't necessarily be counted out, and I think that's what it is. And in reality, we're just starving. We're starving for a heavyweight champion, and that's what it is, man. And I think once the heavyweight division gets that in order and actually gives us a undisputed championship, I think boxing is going to really change, and people are going to come back to the sport.
I think with that being said, that means we have to end crossover fights. Now, I know you're going to clown me for this. I know there was talks of Amanda Nunes, Claressa Shields, and, she said she's been open to it, and I praise that. But as someone who is starting to dedicate more time and trying to respect more the sport of boxing coming from the MMA side, I only feel that this crossover works when it becomes a spectacle. And we can agree to disagree on that. That's why Floyd and Conor, in my mind, made sense, because they did the world tour, because they were polarizing figures. All due respect to Claressa and Amanda Nunes, neither of them get the respect they deserve. So I don't know if the pay would be there, if the attention would be there. I think if boxing just sticks to what it needs to do to get everyone back in, we don't need these crossover fights. Would you like to see this talk of crossover fights end? No, because I think there's room and there's place for anything. I think if we look at it for what it really is, then fine. It's just a spectacle. It's just entertainment. First of all, you have celebrity basketball games. Nobody says, hey, this takes away from the NBA. Hey, I don't want to see J. Cole making a layup. No, it's a spectacle. It's entertainment. When they have celebrity basketball games, the crowd is there. Like, they fill out the stadium, because people understand what they're watching. And if these boxing fans would shut up for a minute and realize that this is not an actual boxing match. This is not that boxing match that's going to hold weight. This is just entertainment, and if you place it in its proper box, then it can be respected and it can be enjoyed and appreciated. We have to agree on something before I let you go about this sport. No Mike Tyson fights, right? Like, are you good with Mike just sitting back and chilling, smoking weed, doing his podcast? Like, I don't want to see him fight at 53 years old.
I don't want to see him fight, but if the man wants to make money, fine. But do I really want to see it? No. Will I watch it? Of course. I hope it's an exhibition. I hope it's with somebody who's around his age. And I hope neither him or his opponent doesn't get hurt.
Barak, I want to thank you so much for all your time this morning. Boxing is back, so we can all celebrate, but even through times where it doesn't feel right to say we can celebrate, I appreciate you, like I said, being so candid about the social injustice that has plagued this country for hundreds of years and continues to plague us as humans, no matter where you live, no matter what color you are. Injustice, racism, it's something I think if addressed correctly, we can make a change. So thank you for helping me become what I hope is a better person and helping address how we can make those changes. At the Boxing Bully on Instagram, right?
Yes, sir.
And you have
on Twitter, the Boxing Bully on Twitter, because somebody stole my name. So I'm in talks with that person. I think we're gonna fight on I think next Saturday. I'm supposed to meet him and beat him up in a parking lot. So I can get the name back, because it's actually trademarked. But at Boxing Bully on Instagram, the Boxing Bully on Twitter, but you don't need don't do that. Just go to one of these rallies and speak up. You know what I'm saying? And listen to my man Mike's podcast, and that's all, and that makes me happy.
I appreciate that very much. You guys can check out the Ak & Barak Show on Sirius XM and DAZN. And again, follow Barak on social media. Barak, thank you so much.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you, man. God bless you, bro.